So in the last video, I talked about how I was diagnosed quite dramatically by text message when I was by myself, which wasn't ideal for emotional purposes, but also because it meant that we had no idea what we were supposed to do next. So after I was diagnosed by text message, if I've not mentioned it, first thing I did was call Claire and I said, look, I'm really sorry, I've got cancer. I think you should probably come home. And your response, I mean, I remember, I don't know if you remember, your response was, what?
Yeah. I was in the middle of the office in New Jersey. I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
So Claire came home, we talked about it, and then I called the office, the surgeon's office, the person who'd done my biopsy, and basically said, like, what now? Because again, I thought if I ever got diagnosed, there would be a doctor involved, and they would sort of say, terribly sorry, Mr. King, it's bad news, here's what we do now. Whereas in fact, there was none of that. So I called the surgeon, she said, right, I know an oncologist, she's really, really good, she should be able to see you quite soon. They gave me her phone number. So I called that doctor's office, as sort of I had done with the surgery, and set up an appointment. So this was the 29th of October, and fortunately over the weekend she was able to see me straight away the following week on the 4th of November. So we went along to her, and we had our first proper oncology consultation in which we discussed what Hodgkin lymphoma actually is, because again, I'd been Googling it furiously since the diagnosis, but really had no idea what we were expecting. I think at that point too, I just sort of assumed they'd give me some pills and that would be it, but you had done a bit more advanced Googlage than I had, and knew a lot more about it, at least in theory.
Your optimism was commendable though.
Thank you very much. So yeah, we spoke to this woman. She ran me through the checklist of the symptoms that I discussed in the last video, and we assessed where I was likely up to. And then she booked me for a PET scan for the following morning. Now, I actually have some footage from that time. Not of the PET scan itself, but of my reaction to the PET scan. So I may insert that. So we'll hear from past Ted,
Yeah.
who's just been through it, to explain how that all went down. As you can see, at present, Claire and I live in New York. You can't see that, but we do. I'm about to be between contracts, which means both my visa and my health insurance run out in the next sort of 3 weeks. I want to be treated in a system and a format that I'm familiar with, and I trust the NHS a lot, particularly for something this big, and I want to be near my family for it. So even if I was insured up to the eyeballs, I think I would still go home. Today is Monday the 4th of November, and we're flying home on Thursday the 6th. Hang on, no, Wednesday. Wednesday the 6th. And so tomorrow, Tuesday the 5th, is both election day in America and also the day that I'm going for my first PET scan. Because I can get a PET scan here, I think it's also a CAT anyway. Because I can have it done, I will have it done, which means that while I'm going through the early stages of assessment in the UK, I'll likely get the results from my PET scan from the US, which means I will just know slightly earlier on if there's anything else going on in my body. And hopefully that will help in some way to speed up the process of getting staged once I'm home. Officially, I don't think it can. I think they've got to do all of the same tests themselves, but at least, you know, if it comes back saying there's something massive and weird looking in your liver or whatever, that's the worst case scenario, but if that does happen, then at least we catch it early enough that we can do something with it. So yeah, I have to do that in the morning, first thing, and then I need to go to my storage unit in Brooklyn and just dig out some things that I might need, because Claire and I, we packed up and came here in the summer, so all my winter clothes basically are still over in Brooklyn, so my boots, all that kind of stuff. And we're going back to the UK, so it's going to be important to have all the waterproof cold gear stuff. Nuance, but anyway, I've got to figure that out tomorrow, and then pack, do any last minute shopping for American stuff that I won't have access to for the next few months, because then we're flying first thing on the Wednesday and we won't have time for any life admin that morning. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a day tomorrow. I don't know if the contrast dye is going to make me feel like shit and therefore going to really slow all the rest of that down, but we'll have to wait and see. I think that's about it for now. I'm going to miss this place a lot. I'm hoping to come back here at least for a week in December if I'm well enough between rounds of chemo and stuff. Just to have some time here at Christmas and to get the flat packed up. If not, that's all going to be on Claire to do. Right, so that's it. So now the next thing will be us getting up and going to the hospital tomorrow morning. New day, new vest. It's Tuesday the 5th today, so American Election Day, PET scan day for me. And I don't have to whisper because Claire's not in bed anymore. It is about 1:30 in the afternoon. She's in the office. So the PET scan was first thing this morning. I'm gonna rest on my arm because I'm pretty tired. I was booked in for 8, so I got there for 7:30, and it was like most things up until this point with the kind of appointments, it's all gone like clockwork. I'm never really waiting around, I haven't been so far waiting around for things to happen. Like extended periods between things, sure, it's been like 2-3 weeks between appointments at times, but once you're in the appointment, it tends to just be kind of a machine, like a duck, 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 duck. So PET scan, yeah, I was a bit apprehensive about it because I'd heard that the dye can make you feel sick, and that didn't sound fun, and also being locked in a tube for an hour didn't sound fun either. Neither of those things was the case. It was absolutely fine. I don't know if it's the same everywhere, if it's just, I was in a brand new clinic, it's literally opened up during COVID, and I don't know if there's like differences between the machines and the drugs they use, but basically all that happened was I went and had my blood taken again so they could check my blood sugar level, because a lot of the way the PET scan works has to do with glucose, and the dye that they inject you with is a glucose serum that's radioactive that shows up on the scan. So it goes throughout your body. I don't know the science, I'm not going to pretend I know the science, but it lights up and it shows if you've got tumours and that. Because of that, you're not allowed to eat any simple carbs or sugars basically the day before your PET scan. I didn't know that because mine got booked yesterday afternoon, so I had potatoes for lunch yesterday, which I shouldn't have done, and they didn't tell me off, but they noticed it when they tested me. But that's about it. And then the dye itself is in just this little tube in a big scary radioactive like metal container thing, but they just go boop. You have a cannula in and they sort of inject it through, actually that's through my elbow, but either way, it was seconds, it was tiny. I thought I'd be like hooked on a drip for ages while it all went in and circulated, but absolutely not at all. It was just really, really quick, just a very quick injection. I did then have to sit still for an hour in the room in a comfy chair because your muscles have to relax while it circulates. It has to go all through your body, obviously, but then also if you tense your muscles too much to the point that you can see activity in them, then they'll get flagged in the scan as well. So literally the guy said, I had Claire with me for it. The guy said, since the two of you are here together, just bear in mind you can't talk that much because even the act of talking will trigger muscles in your jaw, and because my cancer's in my neck, they need to have a very clear image of it. So yeah, so that first part, the injection and everything was fine, absolutely fine. Much better than I thought. And then the scan itself was also fine. I'm not by any means claustrophobic, and I've never thought that I was, but I did sort of have this apprehension that I'd find out that I was claustrophobic halfway through my PET scan. So they'd load me up and put me in a tube and like, I was stuck in there. I also get quite bad sleep paralysis, and I was tired because it was first thing in the morning and I wasn't allowed caffeine. So I was like, what if I fall asleep in the tube, get sleep paralysis? And then I think the sleep paralysis demon's trying to get me in the PET scan. That's gonna be rough. But anyway, not only did that not happen, I was very comfy. It wasn't an hour in the tube at all. It was 20 minutes max. They play classical music. Well, they play What You Ask. I asked for classical music because I thought that was the least scary thing to listen to. And the first thing that they do, and again, I don't know if this is the same for all of these machines, but they push you right the way through it and out the back. So your head pops out the top of the machine and you realize you're in an open cylinder. You're not in a closed off, enclosed space. And again, I don't know that they do that for that reason. I think maybe they're calibrating it, but for me at least, it meant that I popped straight through, and the first thing I saw was, oh right, like if I have to, I can flip over and crawl out of this thing incredibly quickly, out the top. And then that made any anxiety just disappear. And then they I wore my clothes. They tucked me in with a thing under my knees to push them up, and a very comfy pillow. Put my arms in a sling so I was nice and cozy, and then put a warm blanket over the top of me and then shoved me in. And like I said, 20 minutes. I didn't even hear the sort of vroom, 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 vroom thing that you're supposed to hear in an MRI machine. It was just quite calm. Almost disappointed when they took me out because I had to get back up and I was sleepy. And then, yeah, I mean, that was really it. They said I should get my results from that in the next 24 hours. We're actually flying home first thing tomorrow morning, so I figure they will probably try and call me while we're in the air, which will irritate everybody, but that will just be what it will be. I'll land tomorrow night in the UK and then call silent at me all of the fucking time. And I don't know if it's a cancer thing or if it's just I've been quite stationary and it's warm at the moment. So yeah, that's about it for the PET scan stuff. I would say I will likely have another one, just because the system in the US and the system in the UK don't actually talk to each other clinically. So although I will know, and I can highlight that to my doctors in the UK, they will still, for their own due diligence, have to put me through the process again. But having done it once, I'm not remotely bothered. It's just a couple of hours in, out of your day, end to end. So, for whatever reason I'm making this video, if anyone ever ends up watching it who is facing having a PET scan, I hope this is some comfort. The worst part about the whole experience was not being allowed to have caffeine this morning or like carbs yesterday. Man, I was kind of a dick about that. That's it. I was not joking about being sweaty. That's ridiculous. Okay, so next thing is, like I said, we're flying early tomorrow, so I have to go and sort out the rest of my life admin today, which means, at the very least, going to the storage unit in Brooklyn, basically opposite our old flat, and looking at some clothes and bits and pieces. That will be quite a chunky round trip. It will take about an hour, I think, probably to get down there, but actually once I'm there it won't be too bad. Then I want to go to CVS and pick up some American drugs, because they're better than English drugs in some cases. And then I've got an ECG booked for tomorrow that I can't go to because I'm going to be flying, so I need to call up and cancel that. And I have a therapy appointment on Thursday that I can also not do because I won't be in the country, so I need to cancel that as well. So that's just the life admin I have to go on and do now. But yeah, that's about it. Okay, this might be a bit of a faff. Okay, so I've been somewhat defeated by this. I think my boots are probably in one of these, but I don't have it in me to pull this all out and put it back. See how out of breath I am. So I've got my hoodie I wanted, I picked up a t-shirt that I wanted, and I've checked on everything and everything's fine. So that was worth the trip, I think. I'm glad I tried at least. Annoyed because they're good boots and I would like them for the winter, but I can always get more.
What's the word?
I think it's filming a baby.
What, me?
I don't know which one of us it is. It's just infant mode. It's just come on.
It was your fresh-faced baby skin.
Yeah,
I don't know
maybe.
that it's me.
So we're home again. So, really the first substantive bit of this saga, yeah, that'll do. Really the first substantive bit of this saga takes place after the diagnosis. The next thing that we need to explain is when we went to see an oncologist in New York. So I'd had the surgery, lump was out, surgeon had recommended an oncologist that we go and see. We went to go and see her. Now the thing is, I don't know if it's because my cancer brain, which is a real thing, was making me very stupid, or whether it was the cumulative stress of the situation, but I genuinely don't remember this appointment. So I know it happened, and I have like little flashbulb memories of sitting on the examination table and talking to the oncologist, but I really do not remember any detail about it, like how we got there, whether I had any tests done, really most of what she said. So fortunately Claire remembers everything in minute detail. So I'm tapping her in. Tagging?
Both.
I'm bringing Claire in for this part of the video just because I can't explain it, but Claire can.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hand over to you to talk about what happened when we met the oncologist.
And I remember it in very vivid detail, and I think that's just two different stress responses to what happened. You have, at this point, I think your project management mode hadn't kicked in quite yet, and you were thinking of all of the long-term things. And so I think that's probably why you don't remember it. Like it was you. I think you were still in shock at having the diagnosis.
Yeah, I was actively thinking, like planning coming home.
Yeah, exactly. So I think another couple of things. The appointment that we had was like 8 a.m. because the surgeon actually really kindly put us through to someone quite quickly because we clearly didn't know what we were doing, and I
don't think she put us through. I think we had to call her. Didn't she? She gave me her phone number. I remember.
She'd given. She'd called the oncologist and said, I've got some, she called the oncologist and said, I've got someone to refer you to. Because in between then, we had had the diagnosis. I came home from work. We were like, what do you do? We called the surgeon's office, and a receptionist there said, okay, this is what you would normally do. You would normally go around and call oncologists. So I would suggest you start making some phone calls. But in the meantime, let me talk to the surgeon and see what the surgeon says. The surgeon came back and was like, right, okay, I actually know a good oncologist. Let me see if I can streamline this process for these poor British people who don't know what's happening. And they got us in with this particular oncologist, which was why we had an appointment at 8 o'clock in the morning, rather than a normal surgery opening time. We get there and you sort of go down. I very vividly remember going down some stairs. It's sort of mostly underground, and we went to check in, and one of the first things they said was, okay, have you seen them before? What tests do you have? You're not on our system. Have you had an MRI? Where are your blood tests? Like all of these things. And I think we at that time were so sort of blindsided. We were like, none of those things have happened. We didn't know what was, and so that sort of added to it. And I do think this is quite atypical of how it normally happens. So we didn't have any of the normal tests.
Well, we have no way of knowing what is and isn't typical in this situation.
No, and
I think it's weird enough to have to go through a cancer diagnosis, even if you are American. But
I think weirdly,
that sounds wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah, weirdly, example that I was side by siding the whole time is that, like a week before Ed got his diagnosis, my colleague's mum had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and so I do know that they had had a series of tests in the run-up, and they went to see their doctor, and so that did happen for them. And so I think, again, I wonder if it's your first interaction with the health system in America was that you had cancer, and I wonder if you'd had a primary care physician for quite a long time, if you'd had a hospital record, maybe it was slightly different. But so anyway, so we get there and we wait for a little while, and then we go and see the oncologist. She was absolutely lovely, like really kind.
No, I do remember that.
We get in there and we sit down, and you'd been asked to put a robe on, and for me that was quite like strange, because I looked at you and you looked like a patient. I was like, oh God. And I got a picture on my phone so I can insert a picture. Yeah. We were sitting in there, and the lovely oncologist came in, and she went straight into the, okay, so this is how it works. We've seen from your test results that it's showing up as Hodgkin Lymphoma. We think that, we want to try and get you into chemo ASAP. So these are the things that need to happen. I understand that you sort of, your appointment here is sort of one of your first appointments with an oncologist, so I just want to get things booked in quite quickly. She's then started sort of talking about heart scans, blood tests. She mentioned like freezing sperm, sort of just a barrage of information, like really kindly handed over, and she took a bunch of details from us as well. Like, we weren't harassed, or she wasn't trying to get us out the door. It was as if she'd started in the middle of a conversation. We were getting to sort of the end of the appointment. We were both sort of looking at her, and I remember her saying, do you have any questions? And I was like, I know this is going to sound really strange, but are we 100% sure then that he's got cancer? Like, it's definitely cancer? Because there was something in my head that was like, it can't be that the text message is the definitive messaging on this. That can't be what it is.
In terms of contact time up to that point, as I'd explained in the last video, like we'd had so little interaction with anybody medical. I'd had that one chat with the GP, then the ultrasound, another 5 minutes with the GP that he didn't even charge me for, because I was in there for such a short period of time and he couldn't help me. That was when he gave me the business card for the surgeon. I saw the surgeon for maybe 10, 15 minutes and then had surgery, and that was the last I ever saw her. So that was it. That was all we had. And then this text message saying that I had cancer. So, we joked, and I joked in the last video as well about, it was traumatic getting that news by text message, but it was an absolute void of information, wasn't it? We had nothing to go on. And
also, it's going to sound really bizarre, but one of the first things, I got home from work. I was working in New Jersey, so I tried to get the train. The train was going to take like 12 minutes or 15 minutes or something, so I'm just getting a taxi. And we got back and I saw the thing. And obviously the first thing we should have done wanted to do is call family and say, look, this has happened. But again, it was such a lack of information that for about half an hour we just sat there and said, like, I don't know if we should tell anyone yet, because we're not 100% sure what this is.
Legit.
So we were sitting in there, and I asked this question. I said, are you so we're definitely sure it's cancer. We're not like, there aren't more tests that you need to run. And she was so lovely. She sort of looked at both of us as if maybe she was like, oh, yeah, okay. And I vividly remember she closed her clipboard. She had like one of those metal clipboards. She closed the clipboard and she put that down beside her and she said, yes, right, I'm very sorry. Your biopsy showed without a doubt that you have Hodgkin lymphoma. It showed that there's a lot of it within that sample, and so what we need to do quite urgently is see how far it's spread, and we like to stage it quite urgently, and we want to do this quite quickly because you're reporting that maybe this has been here for a while, which means you may have been sick for a while. For me then I was like, oh, right, okay. And again, she was so lovely, but it was like someone had started in the middle of a conversation without giving us any of the backstory. And we're both quite evidence driven as well.
Yeah.
We like quite a lot of detail in terms of like, okay, but you say I have cancer, but what type of cancer?
And certainly at that point, when it
Yeah.
was the very beginning of the process and you have no information at all, I would say as it then continues, I became quite prescriptive about
Yeah.
how much detail I wanted because I didn't want to be overloaded with stuff that at that point
Yeah.
wasn't relevant. But at the outset, we
Yeah.
had nothing to go
Yeah.
with, so I definitely did want more information than we had.
And she was absolutely brilliant. And she said, from there, she was like, you will need chemotherapy. The sort of, it was very much like no, it won't be just a couple of pills. It will be a course of chemotherapy.
Yeah, and
like,
it's going to be quite brutal.
this is going to be quite brutal. You will lose your hair. And she started sort of in the way that we've since learned that oncologists do so beautifully, which is just drip feed information.
Yeah.
Like the more questions you ask, the more they will just add on that little more sprinkle of detail. And so she started saying, okay, yes, sorry, you will need to have chemotherapy. It will be quite harsh. This is chemotherapy that will likely get you to lose your hair, but it's really effective.
It's extremely effective. It's been around for decades.
Yeah. And
She gave us the whole, I do remember as well, and other people who've had Hodgkin's will probably have had the same sort of thing, which is they treat it like you've won the cancer lottery.
Yeah.
So they say, obviously, it's terrible you've got cancer and we need to sort this urgently, but
Yeah.
you couldn't be luckier with the cancer
You've got the
that
best
you've got.
cancer.
You've got the best cancer to get because we know we can treat it.
I remember the oncologist in London said that the first time we sat down. He said, right, you got cancer. I'm not going to lie to you. This is the best cancer you could have. This is curable. We're going to cure this. This is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And you sit there, you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel great.
And then you're in that really weird space where you're like, I mean, if this is good cancer, am I taking up time?
Yeah, I did. I'll cover that in a video.
But yeah, so when she closed her clipboard, she said, sorry, can I just check? You haven't spoken to anyone else about this at all? And we said, no, we haven't. She was like, right, okay, sorry. And then she went into all the details. That was our only interaction. But I would say that whilst it was our only interaction, actually I found it so calming that an oncologist we spoke to was so capable. I think as well, like anything you think, well, my experience is that anything, your thoughts are wild and all over the place. And it just gave us that, right, Ed has cancer. We're doing the right thing by going home. We know what we're dealing with now.
This is serious. It
Yeah.
needs to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my memory of that.
Cool, well done.
You're very welcome.
Right, next thing will be me wandering down the river to talk about the rest of it. What happened when we moved back to the UK. I will now pick up from the bit where we get home. So, we moved home with two big assumptions. The first was that I could just refer myself to whatever hospital I wanted to go to when I got to the UK. That was assumption number one. Assumption number two was that as a passport-carrying British citizen, I would be entitled to whatever healthcare I needed on the NHS. And both of those assumptions were emphatically wrong. So, on the first one, basically I moved home, I think on the Tuesday I got there, and on the Wednesday I went down my old GP from when I was a child and re-registered with them in the UK using my parents' address because I've been living overseas and I didn't have an address in the UK. And they were lovely, they remembered me, they brought me right in. Terribly sorry, Mr. King, let's find out what's what. It was actually a locum, like a temporary doctor who saw me, so she didn't personally remember me, but the surgery did.
And so I said, here's what's happened. I've been diagnosed with Hodgkin lymphoma. I've been to see an oncologist briefly in America. I've had a PET scan done. I'm waiting for the results of the staging of that, so I don't know what stage I am, but I do know that I'm going to need chemotherapy, and I would like for that to happen at University College London Hospital, because they have an incredibly well-regarded haematological cancer centre there. So, how does that work? And the person I spoke to said, right, well, first off, you cannot self-refer. You just go to whatever your local hospital is nearest you, and because you're here in Kent, it's going to be this hospital, which is not a particularly well-regarded haematological cancer centre. So that was the first little surprise. There was a bit of back and forth on that, along with the whole, how was this going to work given that you were diagnosed in America situation, but they went away and they talked about it, and then they got in touch and said, you know what, as it turns out, no, you can't choose where you're diagnosed, but you've already been diagnosed and we accept your diagnosis. So what we can do is refer you to UCLH. It will just be up to them whether they treat you or not, and whether they do that will probably depend on the severity, the urgency, frankly the kind of unusual nature of your specific cancer, whether they think that it's worth bringing you in just for that. So what they then did was send me a letter that had a referral code in it for, what used to be called Choose and Book on the NHS. It's now, I think, called the e-referral service. And so I logged into a portal, I used their code, and I got in touch with the hospital and said, hi, can I come in? That then led to a bit of a back and forth on email with their booking team, who said, right, so your current address is in Kent. Are you sure you don't want to just be seen in Kent? Because this is going to be quite involved. You'll have a lot of time in hospital. It might just be easier for you to be there. And again, having no knowledge of any of this, I said what was the case at the time, which was, no, I'm going to stay with my uncle actually in London. So it doesn't matter. My long-term residence is overseas. I've not been in the UK for 2 years, so it doesn't really matter where I'm seen. I just want to be seen in the best possible place. And they came back immediately saying, well, if your long-term residence is overseas, you don't qualify for NHS treatment. So we'll still treat you. You can have the chemotherapy, but you're going to have to pay for it. And that was the second very big issue. So I had just moved back from the US, where my health insurance was literally expiring, I think that week. And I'd arrived in the UK where the NHS wouldn't treat me for free either. And I don't know exactly how much it is, but chemotherapy isn't cheap. I think in the UK it's probably about 20 grand I would have ended up paying, and I've looked into the policy a bit. Basically what would happen is, because it was urgent, they would treat me, but then I would basically be in debt to them to the tune of whatever the chemotherapy ended up being, and yeah, I think it would have been about £20,000 all in, which I would then have had to have paid back over a period of time. But I was unemployed at the time because I had just resigned my job to come home to get chemo, so I actually don't know how I would have gone about doing that anyway. So basically, the primary piece of legislation that guides this is the National Health Service Act of 2006, and I won't get massively into the weeds with it, but basically what it says is any overseas resident, including a UK citizen who lives overseas voluntarily and is just coming back to visit the UK, is not automatically entitled to treatment on the NHS. What you or I would think of as free treatment. It's obviously not free, it costs all of us a lot of money, but free to you at the point of treatment. You're not entitled to that just because you are a British citizen and a passport holder. There are obviously exceptions to this. If you serve in the armed forces, for example, or if you work for the government and are deployed overseas on business for the country, then yes, of course you can come back and have NHS treatment. But if you don't have a permanent residence in the UK, even if you're British, and you're not one of those people. So in my case, I had voluntarily taken a job in the international service overseas, but I wasn't working for the UK. So I was not entitled to have my chemo on the NHS. The thing was, I had actually moved back permanently. I'd only moved back 2 days before. I didn't have a rental agreement, I didn't have bills that I'd been paying in the UK for the last 2 years, I hadn't paid taxes in the UK for the last 2 years, so I had no way of evidencing my decision to permanently relocate to the UK at that time, and therefore they had no means of knowing that I was now a permanent resident of the UK once again. Basically, I didn't understand any of that. I thought that being a British citizen meant that I was entitled to treatment. So I said, no, you don't understand. I'm British, I'm from the UK, I've just been living in America. Here's a copy of my passport, hope that clears it all up, sorry. And they said, yeah, no, having a passport makes no difference. It's having an address that makes a difference. And if you can't prove that you've got one, we're gonna have a problem. So, if you're watching this because you live overseas and you're a cancer patient and you're planning to visit the UK, the only thing I would say is probably get some insurance before you do that, because again, the way it works, you can receive emergency treatment in the UK on the NHS, which means if you break your arm or your leg, you can show up at any A&E and we will fix you. And they will fix you. The issue then is if you need any ongoing specialist care. So if something goes wrong with your arm and it needs to be reset or re-examined, or you need further tests and x-rays, then they will take your information and they will attempt to bill you for it. So simple emergency stuff, showing up at the emergency room, you're fine. Anything more complicated than that, you will need insurance to cover you, or you will have to pay for that out of pocket if you are visiting the UK. I think the only real practical consideration, if you're watching this video, the odds are you're dealing with cancer in some form. It's highly unlikely that if you have active Hodgkin's, you are planning a trip overseas, but just on the off chance that you are, should you require specialist care when you come, or should there be a risk that you require specialist care when you're here, I think just prepare for that and see if you can get insured before you travel, just so you're not caught out by the way the system works here. So that's that. I'm now walking into the sun. This is going to be less comfortable. So, how did I solve that problem? Well, in the course of resigning my job at the UN, I had to notify the UN basically that I was relocating permanently to the UK. So I had written to them and they had written back confirming that that was my decision, that I was essentially leaving America. And that's partly so they can inform the US State Department and Homeland Security that I am no longer going to be living there, I'm moving home. So I had that as evidence saying that I was planning to move home. I also was planning, as I said, to stay with my uncle in central London who had a spare room. So he was kind enough to draw me up a lease agreement on that spare room, basically on a kind of rolling basis, saying I'll pay him 100 quid a month for it. So I submitted those two documents. I actually don't know that the lease agreement helped particularly, because they read it and said this is a rolling monthly contract, like you could just go home, go back to America anytime. However, the letter that I had from the UN did seem to do the trick. So after literally about a week of back and forth, they did accept it, and they sent me an email saying, right, good news, we've accepted your case. You can officially be treated on the NHS, and you'll be treated here at University College London Hospital. Right, so at that point, I'd had my two major sort of crises dealt with, and the way that I've just explained this in the last kind of 10 minutes kind of rattles through it and makes it seem like it was just all sorted. In reality, it was an incredibly stressful week, and there was a lot of back and forth, and Claire and I kind of settled into this mentality of just solving the next immediate problem that was in front of us, sort of answering the next question, solving the next problem, having a broad awareness of where it was leading and what might be on the horizon, but generally just taking it literally one step at a time, because that is all you can do in this situation. So I've downplayed a little, or at least in my nattery kind of way, I've not made it clear how stomach-burningly stressful that week was, feeling like we were absolutely caught between two systems, neither of which were going to help. There was a period for about 2 days where I truly didn't know whether or not I would be treated. And like I've said, the NHS absolutely would have treated me. They would have given me chemo, it would have saved my life, but when they told me that I would pay for it, something in my head said, well, you can't afford tens of thousands of pounds for chemotherapy. Had I gone back to New York, likely hundreds of thousands of dollars. So basically your options here are extremely limited. The reality is, yeah, I would have had it. I would have found a way to pay it back eventually. It would have been fine, but at the time, it very much felt like they were saying no. So we got through all of that week. I got the email saying, actually, good news, we've accepted your documents. You are going to be receiving treatment. A clinical nurse specialist will be in touch with you shortly. And I kid you not, within I think half an hour, I got the first phone call from what would become my cancer nurse specialist. Now I'm trying not to mention people by name in these things because generally I don't think that's the done thing. However, I have spoken to Fran and I've asked her if it's okay if I use her name, and she says it's fine, which is good for me because Fran is probably the best human being on planet Earth, and I want to do everything I possibly can to make her feel loved and special, and for other people to celebrate her because she is amazing. So I got this call from Fran, yeah, probably within about half an hour of that email. And Fran said, "Hi Mr. King, I'm Fran, I'm your cancer nurse specialist. Here is everything that's about to happen to you." And she walked me through every test I was going to need. She said, "I've booked you." Basically, there's a couple of different types of chemotherapy that you might need depending on the severity of your disease. So I've booked all of it, every appointment. Download this app, log in, you'll see it all in there. And she had. And she said, basically, as we go through this process, whatever you don't need, we will just delete. But whatever you do need, we will keep. And then she walked me through every test, every heart test, every blood test. She said, "Have you had a PET scan before?" I had. This is how this is going to work. She said, "We don't know that the US system is going to talk to the UK system, so just prepare yourself. We might have to redo some stuff." I was prepared for that. And basically, she took me by the hand and my cancer by the scruff of the neck and actually sorted stuff out for me for what was at this point the first time in, well, I think maybe 3 months. Because by this point we're in mid-November and I'd found the lump back in August and started taking it seriously in September. So it had been a couple of months of me trying to figure this out. Just me and Claire together, white knuckling it and just going from one chaotic step to the next. So to have somebody call up and say, "Right, I'm actually an expert in this and my whole job is to make it better for you," was mind-blowing. I don't think I actually cried, but I could have done. It was such a relief to hear somebody get in touch and say, "I'm going to help you with this." I sound a little evangelical about that because I am. It was one of the most amazing experiences. So, right, so I'm on a bench now. So quick overview of the timeline. I was diagnosed on the 29th of October. I saw my first oncologist in the US on the 4th of November. We flew home on the 6th of November and I got back into the GP's office on the 7th of November. So all of this is happening about a week or so after that. That was that whole week of back and forth with the NHS, getting them to approve me as a patient at UCLH and agreeing to pay for it. So yeah, I'm hearing from Fran probably about a week after that, around, I guess, the 13th or 14th of November. Having had that call, a couple of things then had to happen. I had an echocardiogram to check my heart. That's because, and I'll go into this in more detail in my video upcoming about treatment, but one of the drugs that they give you, in particular a drug called doxorubicin, which is a very popular chemo drug for lymphoma and I think breast cancer, can have potential long-term implications for your heart. So they test your heart before they will agree to give you doxy. So that was one of them. The other big thing I had to do, and I say big because it was administratively time-consuming, was meet with a family planning specialist. Now, I didn't know that that was going to be a part of this, and it's not a mandatory part, it's just something that they offer. Because chemotherapy can impact on your fertility, they will offer you a consultation and the option to freeze some sperm or eggs or begin an IVF process if that's the road that your life was already headed down. I mean, Claire and I are of a certain age now, and we hadn't included children in our life plan at this point. But I think there's a difference between saying I don't want them and I can't have them. So just to hedge my bets, I said, sure, let's go ahead and do that, because you never know, in the future I may change my mind. So I went along to this clinic, I will tell you. Yeah, there's no kids watching this. I can't remember now how that conversation started. It was probably an email. I think Fran emailed me and said, would you like
a referral to the family planning service, and I said, what the hell, yeah, go for it. Sounds fun. So she set me up with the appointment. Somebody from the family planning centre at UCLH called me and basically gave me all the information about how to prepare for the appointment, including, you know, what you're not supposed to do for a while before you go and make your deposit. And we had that whole conversation, and then she said, right, so we will see you, I don't know when it was, like, we'll see you on Friday, and I'm just going to send you the location of the clinic so you know where you'll be coming. And that's an objectively funny thing for somebody at a family planning clinic to say about your sperm deposit appointment. So I laughed down the phone, and she just let out the deepest sigh. And I don't know if that was because I was being a child. I don't know if it's because in her many years as a family planning nurse, she has said that by accident thousands of times. I don't know, but that made me laugh, and I still remember it even now. So anyway, I went along to that appointment. It was, I think, somewhere in the basement of UCLH. This was another of those weird moments where the gravity of everything unexpectedly breaks through. So you're compartmentalizing, you're dealing with the stress day to day, but then you're given a 25-page document that you have to read through about everything that might happen over the course of the coming year. Basically, the whole thing is you're signing a waiver to say they can keep your sperm for X amount of time. If you pass away, then this is what happens. Like, does it go to your partner or spouse or someone in your family? Like, you can nominate somebody basically to decide what happens to your sperm in the event of your passing. And also any embryos that are made should you begin an IVF process at the same time. And I don't know what it was. It was just something about, like, I think I was signing it all quite a cavalier way. Like, yeah, that's fine. And then, like, why would they need to know what would happen if I die? And then suddenly thinking, because you've got cancer. Like, you are very ill, and there is a non-zero chance that you will die in the next year. So that's why you're having to do all of this. And then obviously, because it's about family planning, I'm picturing Claire and I'm dead, and she wants to make a Frankenstein Ted baby with what I've left behind. So yeah, I don't know, I wouldn't say I got emotional, but it was quite emotional. It was like an unexpectedly emotional process to go through for literally just filling out a 25-page form. I think it was just sort of the confronting nature of it. Anyway, so I did that. I made my deposit. I got a phone call maybe like a couple of days later from the nurses there congratulating me on giving such a large sample. Well done me. In fact, the guy I think was also laughing. He said, oh, we got like 12 samples out of that, well done. Maybe 17, I'll check with Claire. He didn't say that, I will check with Claire. They're a bit slow, apparently, slow swimmers, but that's to be expected. I'm quite a slow bloke, not a natural athlete or runner, as you've probably surmised. So yeah, that was that. So, the way that they stage Hodgkin lymphoma is unique to the disease, the same as the staging process for all cancers. In Hodgkin specifically, what happens is you will start to develop the cancer in one node and then cluster of nodes somewhere in your body. And although it can happen anywhere, it seems to most typically be up your neck or in your clavicle on either side, or below your waist in your groin. Stage 1 means that the disease is confined just to that one region, or possibly involving an organ nearby. Stage 2 means it's moved out of that node cluster and into a second node cluster. That's stage 2. Stage 3 means that it has crossed your diaphragm, so it's either moved from the top of your body to the bottom, or from the bottom of your body to the top. Your diaphragm is the muscle that goes across your midriff and helps you to breathe. It basically pulls the air in and out of your lungs. Stage 4 is that the cancer has moved from any part of your body into your organs, and because it's a cancer of the white blood cells, most typically that can be your bone marrow, but it can also be anywhere else in your body. It could be your liver or your stomach or your lungs. It can be anywhere. This is an incredibly well trodden path in cancer treatment. They know very, very well what they're doing with this, and because of how your lymphatic system works and how basically all of your nodes operate like, your lymph nodes operate like little checkpoints throughout your lymphatic system, it's really predictable that you will, if it starts here, it's going to sort of move its way across your body to the local nodes that are around it. It's sort of like driving down a motorway and stopping at service stations. Like, you're going to reach certain points before you reach other points. And that's why they use your diaphragm really as the kind of dividing line. Because it's like, it's technically possible, but it is super unlikely to go straight from your upper body into your lower body, because it would have to pass through so many other lymph nodes to get there. And then the additional classification, you either have type A or type B. Type A is just regular lymphoma growing at a regular pace. Type B, as I've said, is aggressive. So there are also myriad subtypes. Mine was the impossible to pronounce nodular sclerosis, which I think just means that the nodules themselves were presenting as hard, which is why when I was biopsied, my surgeon actually thought that it was a harmless granuloma. I don't really know much about the others. I barely know anything about the one I've got, to be honest. As soon as I read that, I kind of disregarded it and said, right, what chemo do I need and am I going to die? Standing in front of a boat now. So after having seen the GP, I then went back to my parents' house where, as far as I was concerned, I was staying for the time being. And I went upstairs and I used the loo. And while I was in there, my phone went. And it was the oncologist that I'd met just like the day before, 2 days before, saying, right, Mr. King, we have your PET scan results and we're putting you firmly in stage 2B. The cancer, according to the PET scan, has spread right the way through your upper body. It's wrapped around your heart and lungs. It goes up both sides of your neck, and you have reported some of the B symptoms, or I think one of the B symptoms, which classifies you as stage 2B, quite advanced. We would like you to start chemotherapy this week. And I had to say, I'm terribly sorry, I'm in the UK. And I heard her pause on the phone and say, what do you mean you're in the UK? And I said, oh, I had to fly home. And then, here's the thing, like, my insurance had covered this. I think Claire and I have gone over the fact, like, our decision to get me tested in the US was partly based on the fact that I've been paying over $500 a month for 2 years for medical insurance that I hadn't used. And because the whole system there is privatised, you are just paying for your own healthcare. So I thought I may as well just get this PET scan done. Anyway, it's very kind of transactional. But even so, I'm British, so I felt incredibly guilty for wasting her time because she wasn't going to be treating me. So I made up a small British white lie and said, I'm terribly sorry, there's been a family emergency. I had to come back to the UK immediately. And she said, what do you mean you had an emergency? What could possibly be more important than the fact that you have cancer right now? And I said, oh, I don't want to get into it. Anyway, thanks so much. I'll let you know if I come back. And she said, please while you're there, seek urgent medical treatment. Get to a hospital, tell someone that you have stage 2 cancer and that you need to start chemo immediately. So I said, will do, thanks ever so much. And off I went. There was then a bit of a back and forth in which I tried to get the clinic that I had seen in New York to speak to UCLH. And they did. They communicated via email. They shared a link to the portal that they used for all of my test results. All of that went in. But they couldn't upload everything onto their system because Mount Sinai uses its own software and it just doesn't speak to the one that the NHS uses. So basically the upshot was I had to have the PET scan done again, which we knew was probably going to happen. It just meant that things were pushed back once again a little further than they would otherwise have to be. So, with my sperm all accounted for, the next part was to meet my oncologist in person at the Macmillan Cancer Centre. So Claire and I went along and had a meeting with him. And just like Fran, he was incredible. He gave us, I think, 45 minutes, walked us through everything that had happened so far, like, this is why people are saying this is what Hodgkin's is, this is how it works, these are the main treatments, and this is what we're basically going to do next. So that was phenomenal. I logged him in on his computer to my portal so he could see the scans for himself. And he said, oh yeah, no, that is stage 2, classical Hodgkin lymphoma. I absolutely get it. It's just we have to have these records on our files so that we can compare a series of PET scans over the course of your treatment and recovery against the baseline. So we can't just have that element missing. Completely reasonable. He gave us all the time in the world to ask as many questions as we wanted to. Seemed a little disappointed when we didn't have as many as I think he maybe hoped, because he just likes talking about this stuff. And that was incredibly reassuring. One useful thing about the American system and having as much autonomy as you do is they send literally all of your results to you. So, I mean, the NHS will send you your blood test results and like a letter saying what your PET scan showed. But in America, they literally send you the scans so you can scroll through them, and it's weird and a bit gross, but also really cool. So I will include here a little run through, or maybe I'll do a cutaway. I will decide when I'm editing how best to go about this.
Fran, we've met the oncologist, I've started going for tests, I have another PET scan done, that just confirms what we already knew, so that's all fine. I then have an echocardiogram. That is where you lie on your side, they lube up an ultrasound wand, I think, and then they get right into your chest and scan your chest and heart area. Had that done. May or may not have had a clicky ECG as well, I do not remember. I went back in and saw the oncologist on the 21st of November with Fran in attendance, and they agreed that I'd be on something called the HD17 protocol, or the HD18 protocol. It actually changes in my notes. I will look it up and I will give a lot more information in my chemo video. But for now, we agreed that I would be starting on the 25th, and then on the 24th I would go in and I would have a central line inserted into my arm for the purpose of delivering the chemotherapy. That was the schedule. Again, more on the central line in another video. Basically, he said, we don't have the results of your heart scans yet, but you know, you're young, this is going to be fine, we're just going to book you straight in. Then on the 23rd, Claire and I were going out for dinner with some friends. We were waiting outside a popular Indian restaurant in Shoreditch, which requires you to queue outside for a long time. If you live in London, you probably know which one I'm talking about. And I got a call, and it was from my oncologist, and he said, look, thing is, I hate to tell you this, but you're in heart failure. He said, your test results have come back. Basically, your left ventricle isn't pumping enough blood through it. That's called a low left ventricular ejection fraction, and that means in heart terms you are technically in heart failure. Well, not technically, you are very much in heart failure, and actually is pretty bad. So he said we're going to need to do a couple of things. As it turned out, from the PET scan they could see I had a concentration of tumours about 4 inches by 4 inches between my sternum and my heart, and it was pushing down on my heart and stopping it from working properly. And also, in oncology cancer terms, he said just having cancer around your heart can be enough to put stress on it and stop it from working properly. We don't 100% understand the science of that, but it is likely the cancer acting on your heart and stopping it from working. So he ordered a cardiac MRI and sent me over to a different hospital, St. Bart's in London, to have that done as soon as possible. He said, in the meantime, we're pushing all of your chemotherapy back by 2 weeks into December while we investigate. So I went along, I had this cardiac MRI done. I think I had it done actually on American Thanksgiving Day. We were waiting, if I remember correctly, for that. They took me in the tube. It was very like a PET scan, just without the radioactive dye. I was in there for a full 60 minutes, which I think is the maximum time you can be in there. And basically what was happening was my surgeon, if you've seen my last video, you'll remember that during my surgery I woke up temporarily and started thrashing, and as a result the scar in my neck is actually quite wiggly. Well, they'd left some sutures in there, the dissolvable kind, but also it was just a bit of a mess, and it was showing up on the MRI as an unidentifiable object sitting in my neck. So they were going back and forth trying to assess what this thing was that was in my neck for like an hour. So the MRI scan came back. Obviously it showed I had cancer in my upper chest, but it didn't show any signal that I had an underlying problem. So they decided that the best thing to do was just crack on with chemotherapy, because as far as they could tell, the thing that was causing trouble with my heart was the cancer, so let's just move on. During this period, they'd put me on quite strong steroids anyway to try and shrink the tumours down, and that seemed to be making me feel a bit better, so they just kept me on that as part of the regimen. So with all that being settled, Fran had then moved all of my appointments back to the 9th of December, and that really was the last step. And similar to what I said before, you know, I've been describing this like it's one long administrative process, that it's more of okay, and then we do this, and now we do this. But obviously the whole process was extremely stressful from end to end. Finding out that I was in heart failure, very frightening. Weirdly, finding out that it was caused by cancer, surprisingly comforting, because finding out that I had a congenital heart condition at that point just kind of would have been a hat on a hat, I think. And we're back.
3, 2, 1.
And we're back. So there isn't really much of a moral or a takeaway from this, other than I just wanted to share the quite interesting and complicated and chaotic and at times quite scary process that we went through moving home and getting onto the cancer pathway here. I hope some of this will be helpful to whoever's watching this. I don't know. I think we all have quite different experiences going through this, and certainly our experience of starting in the US and moving to the UK is quite niche. So I don't really expect many people viewing this will be in exactly that position. But what I'm very interested to know, if you are American and you've been through the American health system, like how much of this sounds familiar to you and how much of it is completely unusual? Because obviously for us, we have nothing to compare it to. It felt very unusual. But the whole thing about having to navigate the system yourself and set up your own appointments with doctors who are just sort of recommended or that you find online, like is that how it works everywhere in the States, or did we just have a particularly strange experience with that? I would like to know. So if you have experience, please do let us know. Also, if you just have experience generally with Hodgkin's or your own diagnostic story to tell, then please do go ahead, because I think these things are better off shared.
And I think as well, I was just sort of, Ed said earlier something about it being like feeling like it's linear and you just go from one to the other, and when you lay it all out like that, that is exactly what happens, and it makes it seem as though it's a very easy, non-stressful process. And I think that that's not necessarily true. There is a system that you can tap into, and the second Fran was on our side and felt like we were like part of Fran's team, that did hugely take the pressure off. But for most people, I think it's true to say that you're still dealing with a system you probably never experienced before, with a set of words within a whole language you've never heard of before, and also losing a bit of control over your life because you have to suddenly turn up for doctor's appointment, and it absolutely has to take priority. It is chaotic, and so I guess if this is happening to you right now, it's happening to someone that you love or you care for right now, then I think if it feels chaotic, then having sort of been through it with 2 cancers now, and one cancer being drastically different from the other in terms of the process still, I think it is just chaotic. But that's not to say that it's chaotic, so deal with it. The other thing...
Yeah, it's not like it's supposed to be.
Yeah, it's not like it's supposed to be. I think it just feels chaotic. And
like one of my relatives who, when I said that the chemo was really shit and I hated it, said, yeah, it's supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
So,
I don't want it to be.
No, it's famously like that. Yeah. It's not like it's supposed to be like that.
It just is.
It shouldn't have to be like that.
And so I think the big thing that I'm taking away from all of this so far is that across the Hodgkin lymphoma and now across the bowel cancer, I've never once met a medical professional that we've really engaged with that hasn't been happy to just re-explain something or sit down and sort of go through it again like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And so
just make sure you absolutely understand it at the level of detail that you need in that moment.
Yeah, and I think just ask questions.
Yeah.
And if you have, I got lots of advice to take a notebook, to write questions down. I never really took notes in a meeting, but I definitely wrote notes in before I went into meeting to ask questions. Because things will just occur to you in the middle of the night that you don't understand, or you'll be reading some paper and you're like, I don't know I've forgotten what that word means. And maybe it's nothing, but maybe it's really important.
Yeah.
And
getting that information from your medical team is 1,000 times better than getting it from Dr. Google, because Dr. Google is always wrong.
Yeah.
Or at least never has the full picture for what it's dealing with.
Yeah.
So.
And so I think, so that would be my sort of moral of the story, but just it's my takeaway. But I guess what you've described, or
to conclude,
what we've described is a fairly chaotic America to London, a transatlantic
adventure,
cancer experience.
An odyssey.
The only way I think we were able to process things in the way that we did and just go from that one step to the next was by making sure that we really understood what was happening in that moment, why it was happening, and then what the next step would be.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice. Ask questions. If you don't understand, keep asking, because your medical team don't want you to be confused.
No.
They really want you to understand what's going on, and they really want to make sure that you're completely comfortable and happy with your treatment.
Well, they also want to make sure you're following instructions, and you can only do that most of the time if you understand why you're being given the instructions in the first place.
Yeah.
So anyway. Yeah, cool. Thanks, love.
You're very welcome.
Join us next time on Ted's Not Dead, where I will be discussing mental health and the cancer journey. I think that one's going to be so depressing.
It's a wild ride.
Yeah. It's going to get real. Okay, cool. I think that's it for today. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.